Live streaming too. Hello, everyone who's joined so far. We're going to get started in just a moment. Just going to start the Facebook live stream. If any of your friends or family want to watch it, let them know to go onto our Facebook page, Saving for College. And like I said, we'll start shortly. Okay, to everyone who's joined so far, just repeated this a little while ago, but we're about to start. I'm just setting up the Facebook live stream, so we have that, and we'll get started. Okay, almost set up. Cool. I guess we'll just start while that gets set up. So thank you everybody for joining. Just to introduce here our speaker, Mark Kantritz. He is the expert when it comes to student loans. For those of you who've come to our other webinars, this is a new presentation. We're focusing a little more now on overcoming challenges during repayment. So Mark is here. He has a presentation ready for you guys. He's also going to be answering questions. He's quoted most often by Forbes, Wall Street Journal, a bunch of financial publications. So if you guys have any questions, try to stump the expert. I dare you. You're not going to be able to. Mark is definitely the guy to come to with any of these questions. So if you do have questions, write them down in the Q&A box. It should be a little button at the bottom of the tab on your Zoom screen. You can use the chat window as well. I'll be aggregating the questions. Mark will then answer them. And without further ado, I'll let you get us started, Mark. Thanks.
Thank you, Julian. So this is the 6th of 7 webinars about student loans. This one is about dealing with financial difficulty. The others are about borrowing student loans, repaying student loans, refinancing student loans, loan forgiveness, choosing a student loan, and how much to borrow. We also have more than 500 articles about student loans on the savingforcollege.com website. So let's start with the causes of financial difficulty. The primary causes of financial challenges that affect your ability to repay student loan include excessive debt, which occurs when you have more debt than you can afford to repay in 10 years. If your total student loan debt at graduation exceeds your annual income, you've borrowed too much money and you'll struggle to repay your student loans on a standard repayment term. That means you'll need an alternate repayment term like extended repayment or income-driven repayment to afford the monthly loan payments. And obviously there are things that you can do like choosing less expensive college or living like a student while you're in school so you don't have to live like a student after you graduate. But we're focused in this talk on what you can do now after you've already left college with too much debt. There's also, and sometimes people have difficulty managing their money. They may run out of money at the end of the month and not have enough money to pay all their bills. But the student loan problem, as that people often talk about, really is not a student loan problem so much as a college completion problem. Students who drop out of college are 4 times more likely to default on their student loans than students who graduate, and they represent about 2/3 of the defaults. They have the debt, but not the degree that can help them repay the debt. So although 1 in 6 bachelor degree recipients graduates with excessive debt, very few of them default on their student loans. Now let's turn to 2 different types of financial difficulty. There are short-term problems and there are long-term problems. Examples of short-term problems include financial difficulty that will end after a few months, like short-term unemployment, medical and maternity leave, and other reasons why you might need to suspend your loans for a few months. Whereas long term, you have a job and you're earning money that you're using to repay your student loans, but you're just not earning enough money to repay your debt. And this can also include, spending patterns that cause you to live beyond your means, where you're carrying a balance on your credit cards because you don't have enough money to pay down your credit card debt. Now, when you experience financial difficulty, it's very, very important to look for options other than defaulting on your student loans. So oftentimes, many borrowers mistakenly believe that the interest stops accruing when they default on their student loans or stop paying their loans. The opposite is true. Interest continues to accrue on your loans, whether you're a delinquent or in default. And just because you're not paying your loans doesn't mean interest isn't being charged. And so your loan continues to grow while you're in a delinquency or default. And your progress in repaying your student loans, once you're no longer delinquent or in default, is going to get slower and slower because late fees and collection charges will be added to the loan balance. So collection charges can be as much as a fifth of each loan payment. Those collection charges mean that there's less money to pay down the interest that accrued and the principal balance. So your progress in paying down the loan balance will get slower and slower and slower. Now, there are lots of options besides delinquency and default. You should contact your loan servicer to ask about the options. And these can include deferments, forbearances, alternate repayment plans, loan discharge, and loan forgiveness options. And there is no benefit to strategic default, where you intentionally default in order to try to get a loan settlement. If you default, the monthly payments under administrative wage garnishment are going to be higher than under an income-driven repayment plan. In fact, what people often ask, saying, why do people default knowing that they're actually going to end up paying more than under some of these repayment options that are available under the federal student loan programs? And you should contact your loan servicer to ask about your options. But before you do this, look on their website to see the information about their options for financial relief. Sometimes it's buried on the website, so you have to search around for it, but it's a good idea to know what they say that they do before you talk with them, so that if they don't offer you an option that you know they offer, you can ask them about that. Oftentimes they'll offer you more on the telephone call than they do on their website because they have a greater awareness of your financial situation. So there are generally a few different types of solutions depending on whether your financial difficulty is short-term or long-term. So the short-term solutions include the deferments and forbearances, which are temporary suspensions of the obligation to repay the debt. Long-term solutions include things that you can do outside of your student loans to improve your cash flow so you have more money to make the loan payments, and changing a repayment plan and refinancing your loans. So let's start off by explaining what the difference is between a deferment and a forbearance. So both are temporary suspensions of the obligation to repay your debt. There are payment pause. Interest will continue to accrue during a deferment and a forbearance, but the difference between a deferment and forbearance has to do with who pays the interest during the deferment or forbearance. The federal government will pay the interest on subsidized loans during a deferment, but not during a forbearance. The borrower remains responsible for the interest on unsubsidized loans during both deferments and forbearances. Now, private student loans also use the two terms, deferment and forbearance, as though they're synonyms, but realistically, private student loans only offer forbearances, and they use the term deferment as though it's a synonym. Now, if the interest while you're on a deferment or forbearance is not paid as it accrues, whether it's paid by you or the federal government, it gets capitalized, which means it gets added to the loan balance, which digs you into a deeper hole. Typically, for the federal direct loans, it's added at the end of the deferment or forbearance period. Private student loans, it can be added to the loan balance more frequently. Okay, so even though interest capitalization is bad, it's better to be in a forbearance than the alternative, which is defaulting on your loans. Now, about a quarter of federal direct loans are in a deferment or forbearance, and we're not counting loans that are in an initial in-school deferment or grace period. We're talking about after your loans enter repayment. Now, about half of these loans are in a deferment and half are in a forbearance. But more than 90% of these deferments after your loans enter repayment are for additional education, like graduate school. Only 8% of the deferments, which is 1% of borrowers, involve the economic hardship deferment or the unemployment deferment. Now, those figures are prior to the pandemic. They may have increased due to the pandemic. So now let's look at the types of federal deferments, of which there are many. First, there are several deferments based on education. Besides when you're initially enrolled in college and during the 6-month grace period after graduation, if you go on to graduate school, you can get an in-school deferment. Now, the graduate fellowship deferment is not available during medical or dental internships and residencies. It used to be available, it's no longer available. That stopped when what's called the 2220 rule was repealed. There are deferments for financial difficulty. I already mentioned them, the economic hardship deferment and the unemployment deferment. There are deferments that are related to military service. And then there are deferments related to medical and disability issues. Now, the active cancer treatment deferment is relatively new, and it's unusual in that the federal government pays the interest on both subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Normally during deferment, the government pays the interest on just the subsidized loans. With the cancer deferment, it's on both, and it continues for not just while you're receiving cancer treatment, but for 6 months afterwards. Now let's dig into the two deferments based on financial difficulty, which is the focus of this talk. The first one is the economic hardship deferment. This is available to borrowers who have severe financial difficulty. That can include receipt of federal or state public assistance, like the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, TANF, Supplemental Security Income, SSI, food stamps, which are now known as Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, or SNAP, and also state general public assistance. And you can even get these, the economic hardship deferment, if you're still working, but you just have very low income. So full-time employment is defined as working 30 or more hours a week. And if your income is less than or equal to the federal minimum wage, which is currently $7.25 an hour, you will qualify. Or if your income is less than 150% of the poverty line, which is based on your family size and the state of residence. Now, 150% of the poverty line is a little more than $19,000 for a family size of 1, $25,000 and change for a family of 2, $32,000 for a family of 3, $39,000 for a family of 4, with an additional $6,700 or so for each additional family member. Now, borrowers, as I said, if they're in a medical internship or residency, are not eligible. That's because the 2220 rule was repealed on July 1, 2009. So based on their financial circumstances, they will no longer qualify for that economic hardship deferment. The 2220 rule allowed medical school graduates to qualify if their monthly loan payments were more than 20% of their monthly income, and their monthly income minus the loan payments was less than 220% of the poverty line. Since medical school graduates in an internship or residency got low pay relative to their debt, about 2/3 of them would qualify for the economic hardship deferment. But since it was repealed in 2009, that no longer occurs, and they either have to do a forbearance or an income-driven repayment plan. Many of them choose an income-driven repayment plan because that internship or residency may qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And you apply for this simply by filing a form with your loan servicer. Now let's turn to the unemployment deferment. So you can get this if you're receiving unemployment benefits, or if you've exhausted your unemployment benefits, if you're unable to find full-time work. Full-time work, again, is working at least 30 hours a week if that work is expected to last for at least 3 consecutive months. So part-time job is less than that. So if you're a part-time, if you currently have part-time work, you may still qualify for this because you are not currently working in a full-time job. Now, even though the unemployment deferment is available for a total of 3 years, each unemployment deferment is limited to 6 months for the federal Stafford loans, federal PLUS loans, federal consolidation loans. Federal Perkins loans, which are no longer available, that program ended in 2017, but some people still have it, are available have a unemployment deferment for up to 12 months with a 6-month grace period before repayment begins once you get a job. And once again, you apply for this by filing a form with the loan servicer. Okay. Now, let's look at the federal forbearances. Okay. So there are 2 main types: mandatory forbearances, which you can get if you request it. The loan servicer has to give it to you if you're eligible. And then discretionary forbearances, where the loan servicer can decide whether or not to give it to you. Some of these mandatory forbearances are at transition periods, like you change your loan servicer or your repayment plan or your loan status change. They can also include situations in which the servicer believes that you will qualify for a loan discharge or loan forgiveness, but they have not yet received or processed the documentation, most commonly involving the death or disability discharges. But it can also include periods of time when you're volunteering through AmeriCorps. They can also include the medical or dental internship and residency, which aren't eligible for the economic hardship deferment, but are eligible for forbearances. Now, the forbearances that are at the discretion of the lender or servicer can include temporary financial difficulties, such as unemployment, and it can also include when the borrower has reached the limit of the unemployment deferment, which is maximum of 3 years in 6-month increments. And once you run out of that, you can switch to a forbearance. And the disability forbearance is when you're not eligible for the total and permanent disability discharge. You fall short of that requirement, but nevertheless, you're affected by a temporary disability. They can give you a forbearance for the duration of that disability up to that 3-year limit. Now, unlike the deferments where you have to file a form, you can ask for a forbearance by telephone. The loan servicer will have to send you written confirmation of the forbearance within 30 days. And it's important to wait until you get that confirmation before you stop making payments, because otherwise your loans will go into default. And if your loans go into default, you lose eligibility for deferments and forbearances. Then let's look at what's available for private student loans. Many lenders, as I said before, use the term deferment as a synonym for forbearance, but their deferments are really just forbearances. They typically offer full forbearances and partial forbearances. A full forbearance suspends all payments, including both payments to principal and payments of interest, while a partial forbearance includes interest-only payments. Now remember, if interest isn't paid as it accrues, it's going to get capitalized, adding to the loan balance and increasing the amount of debt. So a full forbearance may be digging you into a deeper hole. That's why some of the lenders offer you a partial forbearance so that you're not making your situation worse. Now, they can capitalize, like with the federal direct loans, at the end of the forbearance period, but some of them will add it more frequently, and that can include monthly or quarterly. So you need to understand that. If they're capitalizing it more frequently, that means you're going to be charged interest on the interest. So it'll be compounding. Now, the forbearances are limited to no more than a year in total duration, and they are usually offered in 2 or 3 month increments. Some lenders will not allow you to have consecutive forbearances, so you'll have to make a payment before you once again qualify for another forbearance. Now, in the coronavirus pandemic, the lenders, many of them have started offering what they call a COVID-19 forbearance, which is a 90-day forbearance, and it is upon request. It's not automatic. And this is in addition to that 1-year limit on forbearances. Now, there are some problems with using a deferment and forbearance. They're better than defaulting, but nevertheless, they have certain problems. First of all, interest continues to accumulate on some or all of the loans during deferment or forbearance, and that digs you into a deeper hole. That makes it more difficult to repay the debt after the deferment or forbearance than before. So it's not a permanent solution. So for this reason, you should use a deferment or forbearance only when your financial difficulty is short term. The added interest from a few months of deferment or forbearance won't increase the size of your loan by too much. But if you use a deferment or forbearance for a long term, especially if you stack multiple deferments and forbearances together. First, you do the economic hardship deferment for 3 years, then unemployment deferment for 3 years, then forbearances for 3 years. And then there's a trick that lets you get a fresh set of 3-year limits on each. Well, if you have an extended period of non-payment, that's going to multiply your debt by a factor of 2 or 3 or more. If you use the trick that involves consolidation, you're resetting your clock, but that can significantly increase the amount of debt. So the main exception to deferments and forbearances not counting to public service loan forgiveness is the current payment pause and interest waiver, which explicitly said that the non-payment payments during this COVID-19 deferment or forbearance and the payment pause and interest waiver do count towards public service loan forgiveness. Now, the economic hardship deferment normally will count towards the 20 or 25-year forgiveness at the end of an income-driven repayment plan like income-based repayment. Forbearances don't count, and that economic hardship deferment doesn't count towards public service loan forgiveness. Now, do not stop making payments until you get written confirmation of the deferment or forbearance. You're supposed to get this within 30 days. If you don't receive it, contact the loan servicer. So these aren't a permanent solution, but they are better than defaulting on your student loans. Now, we've added a calculator to our website, a cost of deferment calculator, which shows you what the impact is. Normally if you have a few months of deferment, it's not going to be a big deal. But if you do it for a longer period of time, it will have a big impact. And what this calculator is doing is it's evaluating the impact of the interest capitalization, assuming that it's at the end of the deferment or forbearance period. It's not just calculating the amount of that extra interest that's been added to the loan balance, but also the impact of this on the monthly loan payment and the total cost of the loan, assuming that the loan is reamortized after the end of the deferment or forbearance, which means your monthly loan payment is recalculated based on the higher loan balance. So in this particular example, which involves $30,000 of debt, a 10-year repayment term, and a 1-year forbearance, the loan balance is increased by $1,500 at the end of that 1 year period. And that means that your total payments over the life of the loan will increase by a little bit more than $1,900 in addition to that. And the monthly loan payments will be increased by about $16 a month. So it can add to your costs and make it harder to repay your debt. Now, there are some ways that you can use deferments and forbearances strategically. If you're ineligible for a deferment because you've reached the 3-year limit, you should consider using a forbearance. They have fewer eligibility restrictions than deferments. You should try to pay at least the interest as it accrues if you're able to, because it will continue to accumulate on some loans during deferment and all loans during forbearance. And if you pay the interest, it'll keep your loans from getting larger. Now, deferments and forbearances are per loan, not per borrower. So if you get a consolidation loan, it's a new loan with a new set of deferments and forbearances. So that's a technique for resetting the 3-year limits on deferments and forbearances after and you've exhausted the existing limits. Now, you should also consider income-driven repayment if you've exhausted your deferments and forbearances, because and you might actually have a payment, but a small payment that can be much more affordable. And if you would qualify for the economic hardship deferment, but you've exhausted the limit, you will probably qualify for a 0 monthly payment under an income-driven repayment plan. Generally, if you're single and working at least 34 or more hours a week at the federal minimum wage, you're going to exceed the income threshold for a 0 monthly payment, but nevertheless, it'll be a relatively small monthly payment. Now, if you're already on an income-driven repayment plan, but you lost your job or you've been furloughed or you had a pay cut, contact the loan servicer and ask them to recertify you early. Normally, recertification occurs in October, but if you've had a change in your income, you can ask them to recertify you early, and that'll change your monthly loan payment immediately as soon as they recertify. Now let's turn to things that you can do to try to improve your cash flow. So the first is learning how to manage your money. Start by creating what I call a descriptive budget. Not a prescriptive budget, but a descriptive one. Simply track your expenses for a month. Use a program like mint.com or Quicken or just a simple spreadsheet, and categorize it in broad categories like food, clothing, housing, medical care, transportation, taxes, and so that you can total this at the end of the month. Also just distinguish between needs and wants. Just by becoming more aware of how you spend your money, you're going to be more likely to exercise restraint in your spending. Now, you can then explicitly cut spending, and you would potentially start with the big ticket items, the most expensive parts of your budget. So if you have an expensive car, you could sell it and then either use public transportation, a bicycle, or a cheaper car, and maybe a used car. You could carpool to save on gas. You could move to a cheaper apartment or get a roommate to split the rent. You can learn to cook so you don't eat out as often, and especially learn to make your own coffee instead of spending $5 every time you go to Starbucks or some other cafe. Before you go grocery shopping, it's important to eat a snack so you don't feel as hungry, because you'll be less likely to buy as much food if you're than if you're hungry. If you've got regular expenses like gym memberships, newspaper and magazine subscriptions, cable TV and streaming services, you can cut them, either eliminate them entirely or try to get a discount. And you can call your subscription services like your cable TV company and ask for a discount. You'd be surprised how often you'll get at least a small discount, like 10% off, but sometimes you can get a much greater discount. Instead of eating out, brown bag your lunches at work. If you need a cell phone for work, get your employer to pay for it. Because if they're requiring that you have it, then they should be paying for it. Use coupons and buy things when they're on sale, but only things that you need. Don't buy stuff that you don't need. And substitute free activities for paid activities. There are a lot of free entertainments like museums, movies in the park, and things like that. And you should no longer do any kind of paid entertainment unless someone else is paying. Aim to pay off your credit cards in full each month so that you're going to spend less on interest. If you have to carry a balance on your credit cards, it means that you're living beyond your means. You can also sell stuff that you own that you haven't used in a year. If you haven't used it in a year, you're probably not going to use it next year. So you don't really need it. Sell it, pay down your debt. That's going to save you a lot of money. You can try to increase how much you earn. If you've been doing a great job at work, ask for a raise. Work overtime hours to get more pay if you're not an exempt worker. Or you could switch to a new job that pays better. A little bit challenging in the current economic environment, but this too shall pass. Every time you switch jobs, you'll typically get about a 10% increase in your income. You could also get a part-time job in the evenings and weekends to earn extra money to pay down your debt. And an extra benefit of this is not only are you going to earn more money, but you'll have less time to spend your money. Now, you can cut your loan costs by signing up for auto debit. You get a slight interest rate reduction, typically 1/4 or 0.5%. You can also claim the student loan interest deduction on your federal income taxes to save a few $100s on your tax bill. Every penny helps. Now, the next thing that you can do is to switch to a different repayment plan. So if you're struggling to make your loan payment, and you can switch to a different repayment plan that yields a lower monthly payment, you can do so at any time. Now, which of the available repayment plans will yield the lowest monthly payment is going to depend on your specific circumstances. Generally speaking, all of them are going to yield a lower monthly payment than the standard 10-year repayment plan. But for many borrowers, it's either going to be extended repayment or income-driven repayment that yields the lowest monthly payments. And you'll see, I noticed that there are several different versions of each of these repayment plans. Congress loves to make things complicated by creating new plans without getting rid of old plans. Now, extended repayment involves a longer repayment term, and that repayment term is going to be based on how much you owe. So if you owe $30,000 in debt, you can get a 25-year repayment plan without consolidating your loans. If you consolidate, you have more options, such as a 20-year term for $20,000 in debt, or a 30-year term for $60,000 or more in federal student loan debt. Loan payments under graduated repayment start off low, barely above the interest only, and they increase every 2 years. While they may start off with low monthly payments, eventually they can be as much as 3 times higher. Income-driven repayment bases the monthly payment on your discretionary income, which is the amount by which your income exceeds, for 3 of them, 150% of the poverty line. For 1 of them, it's just 100% of the poverty line. There are 4 different income-driven repayment plans. They're known by their acronyms: ICR, IBR, Pay, and Repay. And the difference between them is the percentage of discretionary income. It's 20% for ICR, 15% for IBR, and 10% for Pay and Repay. So the lower that percentage, the lower your monthly payment. Generally speaking, Pay yields the lowest monthly payment for all borrowers, but not everybody's eligible for it, in which case either IBR or Repay is going to be the better option, but you need to look at the details. And the repayment term for these loans is 20 or 25 years. And so choosing one of these alternate repayment plans means you're going to be in debt for longer. You may still be repaying your own student loans when your children go to college. But if you're pursuing public service loan forgiveness, an income-driven repayment plan is going to be a better option for you than a deferment or forbearance, because you're going to be earning payments towards that 120 payment count, 10 years of payments before your loans are forgiven, if you're in an income-driven repayment plan, as opposed to a deferment or forbearance, which don't count towards loan forgiveness. And because you're increasing the repayment term, it is going to affect your monthly payment, but it's also going to affect the total amount you pay over the life of the loan. So if you increase the repayment term from 10 years to 30 years, you're going to about cut the loan payment in half, but you're going to more than triple the total interest you pay over the life of the loan. Now let's talk about consolidation and refinance, which can and cannot be helpful. Right? So they're merging multiple loans into a single loan, which means you can't target the highest rate loan for quicker repayment, but it may simplify your repayment. And with the income-driven repayment, with the federal loans, consolidation gets you access to some of the other repayment plans, such as some of the other income-driven repayment plans, as well as extended repayment for with repayment terms other than 25 years. But you need to be aware that if you refinance a federal loan into a private loan, you're going to lose the benefits that are associated with federal loans, which include the current payment pause and interest waiver, the death and disability discharges, longer deferment and forbearance plans, income-driven repayment, and a variety of loan forgiveness options. On the other hand, you might be able to qualify to get a lower interest rate, but refinancing to get a lower interest rate might not yield a lower monthly loan payment, since the lowest interest rates usually involve a shorter repayment term, and the shorter repayment term increases the monthly payment, while lower interest rate reduces monthly payment, and usually the shorter repayment term dominates. And borrowers often overestimate the impact of a lower interest rate on their monthly loan payment. They think that if you slash the interest rate in half, you're going to cut your monthly payment in half. But that fails to recognize that most of your payments actually go into the principal balance of the loan, not to the interest. So for example, if you cut the interest rate from 6% to 3%, you're cutting your monthly payment by just 13%. And if you were to cut the interest to zero, your monthly loan payment will be reduced by just a quarter, because you still have to repay the principal balance of the debt. You can reduce the loan payment by more by choosing a different repayment plan than often by getting a lower interest rate. And if you don't consolidate or refinance, you can target that highest rate loan for quicker repayment, which may ultimately save you more money and free up some money in your budget. Now, one of the best ways to deal with a financial difficulty is get other people to help you. There are a lot of variations on this. There's student loan forgiveness, which is usually specific to particular occupations. You can even get some loan forgiveness or loan reductions by volunteering. These are called education awards, which if you aren't yet in college, they can be used to pay for college. After college, they can be used to repay federal student loans. Some employers provide student loan repayment assistance programs, otherwise known as LRAPs. According to the Society for Human Resource Management, 8% of employers currently offer LRAPs. They do so as a recruiting or retention tool to try to attract new employees. And they typically will provide $100 per month to repay your student loans. That's in addition to amounts you're paying. So that can shave a few years off of your repayment term. And the CARES Act made LRAPs tax-free from March 27 of this year through December 31st of this year, through December 31st, 2020. And so it's not going to count as income. Normally, they do count as part of your compensation from the employer. Hopefully, the tax-free benefit will get either extended or made permanent, but usually you start off by seeing the Congress make it temporary, and then they realize that they need to make it permanent. And you should also talk to your friends and family, let them know that you need financial help. Um, it's not as difficult or embarrassing as it may seem. Everybody runs into these problems. And you can say, instead of giving me a birthday present or a holiday present, just give me money that I can use to pay down my student loan debt. If they giving you a birthday or holiday present instead of cash, what you really need, you can always sell the birthday or holiday presents on eBay or Craigslist and then use the money to pay down your debt. And you can also use other sources of money to pay down your debt, like you can use credit cards that provide a cashback benefit, such as the Sallie Mae Accelerate card, as well as more traditional cashback cards like Discover, Citi Double Cash card, the American Express Blue Cash card. These don't charge an annual fee, and if you don't carry a balance, then there's no cost to them, but you're getting a few percent back to repay and to use for whatever you want, including repaying your student loans. The thing to be careful about is don't carry a balance and don't increase your spending just because you're getting a little bit of cash back. You don't want to make your situation worse. Now, there is also loan cancellation and loan discharge. You might not think about the death discharge, but it's a good thing to have so that your heirs aren't affected. Disability is more commonly used. You don't plan on getting disabled, but it's nice that when you are disabled, your loans can be canceled. And the nice thing is that the death and disability discharges are tax-free through the end of 2025. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 implemented that. Hopefully that's made permanent. And federal loans can be canceled upon the borrower's death or upon the death of the student on whose behalf the Parent Plus loan was borrowed. There's a total and permanent disability discharge. Unfortunately, if you have a short-term disability, you can't get your loans canceled. Bankruptcy discharge is very rare because it requires you to demonstrate in an adversarial proceeding that repaying the student loans will impose an undue hardship on you and your dependents. That involves showing a present inability to repay your debt, and that the circumstances that prevent you from repaying the debt will persist for most of the life of the loan. And you must have tried to use all the normal options available to you for financial relief, such as deferments, forbearances, and income-driven repayment plans. In fact, the federal government, when defending its loans against discharge, usually raises the availability of income-driven repayment plans as a defense, saying that they are providing accommodations and you don't need to discharge. Private student loans don't offer income-driven repayment plans, so they don't have that defense. Oftentimes, the reason why someone successfully gets their loans discharged is not because of their own disability, but rather because of the disability of a family member, such as a special needs child, which requires 24/7 nursing care or other hefty expenses. So remember, it's an undue hardship on you and your dependents. Many private student loans now offer death and disability discharges. It depends on the lender. And even if the lender doesn't have a formal program for death and disability discharge, you can always contact the lender's ombudsman to ask for a compassionate review. Now, there are con artists out there, so you need to be careful. Beware of what are called advance fee loan scams, where pretty much if you have to pay money to get money, it's probably a scam, because you can switch repayment plans, get a deferment or forbearance for free. You don't have to pay anyone to do it, and it's relatively easy to do. You just go to studentaid.gov, and it takes you less than half an hour to do all that. But these companies, they claim to do the work for you. And the problem, what makes them illegal, is when they charge you an upfront fee. There are federal and state laws that prohibit charging a fee for what's called credit repair before the work is complete. Now, reducing student loan payments, getting a deferment or forbearance, switching repayment plans, and applying for loan forgiveness are all considered to be credit repair. So if they're charging you an upfront fee to do that kind of work, that's illegal. And the Federal Trade Commission and the state's attorney general have had a crackdown on these kinds of advance fee loan scams. It's called Operation Game of Loans, with the obvious reference to the Game of Thrones. And it's also important that you do not share your federal student aid or FSA ID with anybody, because that's an electronic signature. They can use that to change where your loan statements go to them, and they can sign you up for new loans. And so you don't want to share that with anyone. And technically, if you share it, then you're violating the law. And you should be especially careful when they say, send the payment to them as opposed to directly to the lender. The problem with that is there have been a few scams where they pocket the money that you send them and they never pay down your debt. And after a year, your loans go into default. So thank you. We're now going to open it up for questions. And if there are any questions that we don't get to, I will be writing articles to answer all of the questions that we receive. So look for them on our website and in our student loan newsletter. And now back to Julian.
Yes, thank you, Mark. We have a lot of questions here. Like you said, we're gonna address all of you guys, but starting with some of the most pressing, we had one person ask prior to this webinar, is there a place to get legitimate student loan counseling, in particular for active duty military members?
Okay, so challenges that some of the counseling is provided by the lenders, and you don't necessarily trust a lender or loan servicer. There are some organizations for veterans that provide this to their members. There are also some social workers out there. There are also a few paid services that are legitimate, but it's hard to distinguish what's legitimate and what isn't. We provide a lot of information on our website that goes into a lot of detail on each of these. There are also nonprofit credit counselors that can provide some assistance. They may not have as much familiarity with federal and private student loans as with credit cards, but they can provide you with some advice. And it's not just about getting you into a level repayment plan for your credit card debt or using a home equity loan to pay off your student loans. They do provide some real financial literacy training and counseling. Perhaps your first step would be to contact your college's financial aid office. They can refer you to some legitimate services.
Gotcha. And this actually segues into a similar question we had during the presentation. One guy asked, Mark, you often talk about borrowers talking to their loan servicers about deferment, hardship, etc. I hear so many stories about loan servicers who don't respond, are incompetent, don't make changes, corrections, etc. Any suggestions for dealing with a bad loan servicer?
Well, the first thing you should do is focus on getting things in writing and explore their website before you contact them so you know what they do and don't offer. Also, our website has a lot of information. There is the U.S. Department of Education's website has a lot of information. So do your research, do your homework in advance. If you have problems with a loan servicer, you can file a formal complaint. The U.S. Department of Education has a feedback service. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has a complaint website where you can submit complaints. There are also options for changing your loan servicer with the federal loans. If you consolidate your loans, you get to choose who your new loan servicer will be. But just be, and you may be not getting that much of an improvement, because even though some lenders have a greater number of complaints, they also have a greater number of loans. And when I've looked at the complaint rate, the number of complaints per 100,000 borrowers, it's actually pretty close among all the loan servicers. They aren't necessarily any one is better than the others. So if you switch, you may be getting another loan servicer that you hate just as much. So it's often better to try to resolve the problem. And sometimes if you put your problem in writing, so you send them email or you file a complaint using one of the complaint services, you'll get better results than if you simply call them up on the phone. If you do call them up on the phone, take notes, write down the date you spoke to someone, who you spoke to, what telephone number you called, and if necessary, ask them for their identifier. It might be their name or their employee ID number, so that if you do run into an issue, you can point out that information. Sometimes a best 2 out of 3 approach. You call 3 times, getting 3 different people, and if you get the same answer twice, well, maybe that's the right answer. Sometimes, though, it's the same wrong answer 2 times. And be thorough, be persistent.
Got it, got it. Another question here, is bankruptcy ever a real option, federal or private?
And bankruptcy discharge of student loans does occasionally happen. It's more likely to occur with private loans than with federal loans because the private loans offer fewer accommodations. There is a chance that in the future, bankruptcy discharge rights for student loans will be restored. Generally speaking, the most common situations which a borrower's loans will be discharged are if the borrower is disabled but doesn't quite qualify for a disability discharge. So bankruptcy may be their only option. If there are expenses that aren't considered by the various options that are available for federal loans. So as I mentioned before, if you have a special needs child who requires 24/7 nursing care, that may mean that the amount of money that you have to repay your student loans is lower than simply your income minus 150% of the poverty line. And oftentimes when you do file for bankruptcy, if you're in one of these situations, oftentimes the lender will, once they discover that your situation, they'll settle out of court rather than setting a legal precedent, and they'll cancel your loans. But it does occur. We have an article on our website that goes into detail of the situations where borrowers have successfully discharged their student loans in the past.
Gotcha. We had one question just come in. I just lost. Oh, here it is. I recently received a call from United Alliance Group, and they are one of the advance fee loan companies. I did not think they were a scam because they had all my personal information. They changed my FSA ID. What can I do to get out of this arrangement with them?
Well, and first of all, you call them up and tell them that you don't want this arrangement. And typically there is a 3-day buyer remorse period for any contract. If you're beyond that 3-day period, you can simply cancel it. Also, if you gave them your FSA ID, you should go to fsaid.ed.gov and change your password. And if they've changed your password and you can't get in, call 1-800-4-FED-AID, 1-800-433-3243. That's a contractor to the U.S. Department of Education, and they can override your FSA ID and prevent them from making any changes. And you should make your payments directly to your official federal direct loan servicer and not through a third party. And then contact your state attorney general. They use these complaints to decide who to prosecute and then to proceed with prosecution.
Got it. Here's another one. Can I do an income-driven repayment plan throughout the entire length of my public service loan forgiveness plan?
You can use income-driven repayment for the entire repayment term of your loan. The income-driven repayment plans have a 20 or 25-year repayment term. Income-based repayment and income contingent repayment have a 25-year term. Pay-as-you-earn repayment has a 20-year term, and revised pay-as-you-earn repayment has either a 20 or 25-year term, depending on whether you have loans from graduate school. If you have loans from graduate school, it's a 25-year term. Undergraduate only loans, it's a 20-year term. And once you reach that 20 or 25-year point, your remaining debt, including any outstanding interest, will be forgiven. Now, under current law, that is a taxable cancellation of the remaining debt. So you'll substitute a tax debt for your education debt, but that tax debt will be lower. And there are options for getting that tax debt canceled, like if you're insolvent, if your total debts exceed your total assets, the IRS may, you have to file a form, and it's usually a good idea to use an accountant to do that, but the IRS can sometimes forgive that tax debt.
Gotcha. Related question, are loans on, no, sorry, you just answered that. Question for some families, can you give us examples of exactly how to make a payment while in forbearance to hit the interest due using fake amounts for us to visualize? Is there any advice you have for people wondering about that?
Right, so during the current payment pause and interest waiver, you're not obligated to make payments, but if you still have your job and you can afford to make payments, the first thing I'd recommend is build a 6 months, half a year salary emergency fund, because you might have your job now, but who knows what's going to happen in a month or two. So you want to have that safety cushion in case you do lose your job. But then, assuming that you already have an emergency fund, you want to target the loan with the highest interest rate. That may not be a federal student loan, it might be a private student loan, or it might not even be a loan. It might be credit card debt that you're carrying from month to month. Those tend to have much higher interest rates. So figure out which of your loans has the highest interest rate and make those payments towards that loan as extra payments beyond your required monthly minimum payments, so that you're paying down that debt quicker. And you can make a good dent in your debt during the 6 month payment pause. It's unclear if the payment pause will be extended. The HEROES Act, which passed the House but is stalled in the Senate, would extend it for an additional year. But there's currently the Senate is considering, is drafting legislation. The House already passed the HEROES Act. There may be some negotiation going on in terms of what provisions make it into the final legislation, but I'm optimistic that they may extend it.
Nice. Sort of different question here. Can you explain how you can stack multiple deferments consecutively, even though it is not recommended? Right.
So you don't have a job, or your pay has been severely cut so that you're living under 150% of the poverty line. You can start off with the economic hardship deferment, and when you run out of that, it's got a 3-year limit. If you then qualify for the unemployment deferment, you can use that for another 3 years. When that runs out, you can then switch to forbearances. Those also have a 3-year limit. So that's a total of 9 years during which you don't have to make payments on your student loans. And interest is accruing and your loans are getting larger and larger, but you can avoid paying your loans potentially for as much as 9 years. Then if you consolidate your loans, that consolidation loan is eligible for a new set of deferments and forbearances, which is an additional 9 years. So potentially you could go for 18 years before you have to make a payment on your student loans. The problem with this is when you go for an extended period of time of non-payment, your loan balance is going to get much, much, much larger. When you hear these stories about someone says that, oh, my loan's doubled or tripled in size, not my fault. Well, usually they haven't made a payment in decades. And that interest continues to accrue and it just gets added to your loan balance.
Gotcha. And that, just so everybody knows, I'm including some links to calculators we have on our site that help estimate things like this, like the cost of deferment, what prepaying can do for you, etc. Here's another one. Oh, here it is. What do you do when your monthly payments are too high and you're already on an approved income-based repayment plan?
Okay, so the first thing you should do is talk to the loan servicer, explain your financial situation, and ask about your options. Usually, an income-driven repayment plan is going to make the loan payments more affordable because it's based on your income, your discretionary income, and not the amount you owe. But sometimes you have other expenses like rent, if you're in a high rent area, that can mean that you don't have enough money to make ends meet, even with the lower monthly loan payments. You might, if you have a temporary issue that is making it difficult to repay your loans on an income-driven repayment plan, but you expect that situation to improve, you could ask for a deferment or forbearance, and that will give you temporary relief until you get back on your feet. But the other thing to do is to look at other aspects of your finances to see if there's anything else you can do to improve. It may require adopting an austere lifestyle or getting a part-time job in the evening and weekends so that you have more money to pay down your debt. And don't forget to ask your friends and family for help. If they're able to, they may be willing to help you, especially your parents.
Sounds good. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Mark. And thank you everybody for joining. We're right at 2 p.m. Eastern, so we're going to call it here. But like Mark said, originally, we have a lot of questions in the queue. These are things that Mark has been and will continue to write about. If you have any more questions and just want more advice, want to see more of those tools and calculators that we mentioned, savingforcollege.com/student-loans will have all the information you need. And Mark, I don't know if you have any final thoughts to leave the audience with.
No, I'm planning on answering all the questions that we weren't able to answer, and I may write up answers to some of the questions that we did answer to the extent that we don't already answer them in articles on our website. So I looked for new articles and our newsletter as a good source of answers to all these questions.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.